Wait, what did you say? Dave was in his wife's office. She was the head honcho of the division, the big cheese. Dave, he was a lowly account representative, quite a bit down the food chain. He was a little nervous at first when she came on board, but there were several levels of management between them, so it was all good, he thought. Maybe not. Your numbers are way down, Mr. Waxman. You were the worst performer of the year in your division. I'm afraid we had no choice. X is waiting outside to escort you to your office to collect your things. X stood for Xavier, one of their two security guards. They had always called each other Mr. and Ms. in work settings to keep it more professional. She kept her last name for professional reasons, so she said, but everybody in the office knew they were married. He even had a picture of her on his desk, of her shaking the hand of the chairman of the board as she received her promotion. That's it. 9 years of loyal service to this company and I'm terminated because my numbers are off? If you had bothered to listen to me, you would know. Please, stop. The decision has been made. Let's not make it any harder than it has to be. For some reason, that struck him as funny. Listen, Miss Patterson, She must have hit some button, because all of a sudden 300 pounds of black muscle was in the room with them. Xavier, would you please escort Mr. Waxman to his desk to collect his things? Best of luck to you, Mr. Waxman. Perhaps this will encourage you to try harder at your next position. X definitely looked embarrassed, but he had his own job to do. Dave looked at him and grinned. Come on, X. Like the lady said, let's not make it any harder than it has to be. She was still talking when Dave went out the door. Everyone avoided looking at him, which told him most of them knew beforehand. That definitely didn't improve his mood. He walked slowly, looking those who would glance at him in the eye. They looked away every time, and the women actually blushed. He kept very little in the way of personal items in his office, so it didn't take 15 minutes to pack one small box. He was walking out when X spoke. You forgot this, Mr. Waxman, he said, handing Dave the expensive pen and pencil set she had given him when he made Salesman of the Year the first time. Dave looked at it for a second and dropped it in the wastebasket with her picture. No, I didn't. X drove Dave home, so he could take the company car back. After several attempts at conversation, he got the message and shut up. As Dave got out, X reached over to shake my hand. Dave took it, because it was just his job, and he really liked the guy. Sorry, man. Sorry it happened like that. Dave grinned, even though he didn't feel like it. Me, too. He walked in, looking at the house as if it was the very first time he ever saw it. He realized suddenly there was very little of his presence in the house. It seemed she was minimalizing him at home as well as work. It made him wonder if he had a performance issue at home, and if he'd be canned for not keeping his numbers up. She came in about 7, late even for her. Dave was watching a baseball game and didn't even look up. Hi, honey, sorry I'm late. Meetings ran over. You know how the board loves the sound of their own voices. He didn't respond, just kept watching the game. She looked at him for a minute before deciding to try a different track. What's for dinner? It had been their practice over the years that whoever got home first made dinner. It had occurred to him as he examined their relationship that she probably hadn't fixed dinner more than a dozen times in the last year, and most of those times were because he was traveling. Whatever you decide to fix yourself. I've already eaten. She just stared for a minute before she opened her mouth and started the worst fight of their marriage. Surely you're not mad about today. It was a business decision, honey. It had nothing to do with you personally. I still love you just as much. For an executive and a fairly intelligent person, I can't help but think in this case you're a moron. And by the way, yes, I am angry. In fact, I'm pissed beyond words. You handled the whole thing very badly. Had I ever gotten an unfavorable review in all the time I'd worked there? Where's the paper trail of warnings, counseling, and reprimands? Sure, my numbers were down, but there's a very good reason. One you never bothered to discover. Stop begging. I'm sure I did the right thing professionally. It shocked him so badly that he did stop talking for a minute. She smiled and started to speak, but he exploded. Screw you, the board, and every other a-hole in the company. You were not professional, you were not reasonable, and you damn sure weren't interested in anything I had to say. Tell me, how much input did Adler have in this? She was reeling at his outburst. She actually stuttered for a minute before she got it out. He's been concerned for months, and was very nervous when he brought me the numbers. You had gone from being one of our top producers to the absolute worst. I had no choice. I had to send the message that no matter who you were, if you didn't produce, you were gone. It was the only way I had to keep the respect of the people under me. Once again, a stupid moron. I've been thinking all afternoon, now that I had some free time. When did you stop respecting me as a man and an employee? If you'd had the least bit of love for me, personally, or regard, professionally, you would have handled this completely differently. You could have tried talking to me, give me a heads up, and if it got bad, you could have offered me a chance to resign. Do you have any idea how hard it's going to be for me to find another position? If I can't perform well enough for my wife, someone who is supposed to love me, why would strangers trust me to do a good job? You screwed me in this town. I'll have a hell of a time landing a job now. It's not like I can whip out a glowing review from my old company. Now is it? I've said enough. If we continue, we, or rather I, may say some things that can't be taken back. Why don't you get some dinner, and I'll finish watching the game? She tried one more time. I never thought you'd take it so badly. It's just business, honey. We'll be fine. And don't worry about a job. I make more than enough to keep us. Dave held up his hand. Please, stop while you're losing. I bet you'd love to turn me into a house husband. It would cement your reputation as a tough-as-nails CEO. I can hear them now. Watch out for that one. She's so tough she fired her husband and turned him into a little house husband. Bet she's the one who's on top when they screw. If she isn't banging him with a strap-in, wonder if she makes him wear panties around the house. Well, you can forget that shit. I'll eventually land another position somewhere, even if it's not here. Now please, stop talking. He'd finally managed to piss her off. Fine. Sulk. Get angry. It might give you enough motivation to do a good job next time. FYI, honey, your little tantrum put the skids on the extra good loving I had intended to give you tonight. Looks like it'll be you and your fingers if you want any release in the near future. He shrugged. Fine. At least they won't fire me if I don't perform as expected. That one hit her hard. She tried forming words until she finally screamed in frustration and stomped out of the room. He heard her rattling pans in the kitchen, so he assumed she made her dinner. A little while later, he heard her go up the stairs. She came back in the absolutely no sex for you tonight outfit, an old t-shirt and ratty sweatpants. It seemed to upset that he didn't comment. They sat, and he let the silence stretch. Finally, she spoke. I'm sorry, okay? I wrestled with it a long time before I made the decision. I do love you, and it isn't the end of the world. We can stop talking about it. What's done is done, and you can't unring the bell. I'm going to bed. I need to get up early and put some feelers out, see if I can salvage anything out of the fiasco you turned my life into. Good night. She floundered for something to say, before settling on, I'll be up in a little while. He was already asleep when she woke him with her scream. Seems when she changed, she never noticed that his things were gone. He was in the largest guest room with attached bath and planned to stay there a while. Soon she was knocking on the door, demanding that he let her in. Dave just turned back over, wondering how mad she'd be when she realized he'd changed the lock on the door and she didn't have a key. 10 minutes later, he heard the lock rattle. A few minutes after that, he heard a sigh, and then went asleep. Jen brought her boss her standard coffee and pastry the next morning, as well as her own. She had been with her since her first promotion as secretary and later private assistant. Jen loved Bev for how she treated her, and was the one person in the company who was able to tell her the truth without worry of repercussions. Jen pulled a chair next to the desk, and they went through their morning ritual of coffee and personal time. How'd it go when you got home? Her boss sighed. Not good. Not good at all. He said more swear words in 2 hours than I've heard from him in all the years we've been together. Apparently, when he's angry, the truth comes out, and he thinks very little of my management skills. He even moved out of the bedroom and changed the lock on the one he moved into. Have I told you he threw the pin set he kept on his desk in the trash? Along with my picture? Really? Why is he taking it so hard? Jen looked at her boss with sad eyes. I warned you. You should have left him some dignity. The way you did it was really cold, boss. I had to do it that way. I was sending a message to everyone. No one is bulletproof if you're not performing to standard. How did the rank and file take it? Truth. Always. Well, Bev, it's divided. Most of the men and some of the women think you're a screaming witch. A few admire you, but it's very few. A surprising number are updating their resumes, saying that a company that fires people with no warning whatsoever is not a company they want to work for. 2 more of your salesmen say they've seen the writing on the wall. One already has an interview lined up, and I suspect that in 2 weeks' time, he'll be gone. The other is thinking about relocating to be closer to his aging parents, and this is the incentive he says he needs. Beverly couldn't believe her words. This wasn't what she had in mind at all. She thought that if she showed them regardless of whom it was, She meant business when it came to the company. Everyone would work harder. She had no intention of sparking an exodus. This could be very bad. Very, very bad. She knew that in a couple of years she would be in line for a board seat, maybe eventually chairman. This might slow those plans down considerably. Jin brought her back to reality. What are you going to do about your husband? She waved her hands dismissively, still thinking about her job. Give him a little time and space, I guess. He really does love me, he'll come around. Jin had an idea it was going to take more than that, but held her silence. She had been loyal to Beverly all these years, but if things got bad, if people started leaving, she needed an exit plan. She had her own family to worry about. Dave spent the next 3 weeks being spectacularly unproductive. He stopped going to the gym, stopped eating right, and was drunk more than he was sober. He did nothing around the house, leaving a mess wherever he felt like. Bev tried being supportive at first, enduring his cutting remarks, until finally sinking into silence. He did note that she spent a lot more time at work. Evidently, she felt more comfortable there, where she was queen. He then went through a phase of not bathing. After 3 days, Bev finally had enough. For God's sake, Dave, man up. You stink, and you've got a pretty good start on a pot belly. You might like living like a pig, but I don't. I'm sorry, all right? I could have handled it better, but as you said, I can't unring the bell. Her face softened. Please, honey, I miss the old you. I miss you in our bed, and I miss you in me. It's been almost a month. Why won't you come back to me? Dave held up his fingers and wiggled them. I'm kind of involved now. They seem to love me and have never once complained about my performance or offered to terminate me. Besides, you're already in a committed relationship. She went white, then red. You a-hole. I have never cheated on you, not once in all the time we've been married. Although I have to admit, once the word got out we weren't getting along that well. I've had offers. We'll get back to that in just a minute. And you've cheated on me our whole marriage. Not with a man, but with a job. It will always have first call on your time. You will always put it first above any needs I may have. Know how many anniversaries we've missed celebrating together? 8 out of 13 years. Something was always more important at work than spending time with the man you supposedly loved above all others. Don't get me started on missed birthdays, the times you broke commitments with both our parents and good friends. Ever notice how rarely you see your parents now? Or how many old friends we used to have that we haven't socialized with in years? You just never seem to be able to spare the time. I'm really glad now we never had children. They would think they were living in a single-parent home because they would never see you. As for your offers, how many have come from people higher in the organization? I can't imagine you screwing down. It would have to be someone who could help your career somehow. Dave felt bad for her for just a second, looking at the pained expression on her face. He quickly got over it when she slapped the hell out of him, the first time either had ever touched the other in anger. He looked about 30 minutes later, and the print was still on his cheek. You son of a witch. Don't you know I'm doing all this for us, so we can retire while we're both still young enough to enjoy it? So I'm not Miss Congeniality, and I apologized every time I missed an anniversary or major event in our lives. And we agreed no children. I couldn't afford the distraction, so don't throw that up to me. As for the offers, yes, some were from people who could help my career, but I would never have an affair, because I still love you and could never betray you like that. You need to get your act together, so get showered, dressed, shaved, and let the woman who loves you take you out for dinner. She stopped, out of breath from emotion and the long speech. He gave her a sad smile. Sorry, I've already had dinner, 3 burritos and a large fry. And on the subject of children, I didn't want to be a biological dead end. I loved you so much at the time, though, that the choice was easy. Still hurt, though, when my clients used to pull out pictures of their families. What was I going to show them? We don't even have a dog. You're right, though. The pity party has to stop. I'm going upstairs to shower, shave, and try to turn back into a real person. I'll hit the gym 3 times a day for a while. After all, what else do I have to do? Thanks for the motivational seminar. She just stood there in shock from the words and the fact that she'd hit her husband. Bev was smart enough not to follow him, although when he got downstairs she was very contrite and apologized. I'm sorry, but you don't know how hard this is on me. One business decision shouldn't destroy a good marriage like this. Please, I'm sorry I had to fire you, but it was in the best interests of the company. Like I've told you many times before, it was just business. It doesn't mean I love you any less. He sighed. Look, Bev, I know you think in your heart you did the right thing. Firing me was just the final straw. I've played second fiddle to your career our whole marriage, and frankly, I'm done. I hope the board chair can keep you warm at night, and that the raises and accolades will make up for the loss of grandchildren to dote on. I hope your success fills the void of a sterile life, without family or close friends." He paused. "And is it hard on you because you regret how you handled things and hurt me so badly? Or is it hard because suddenly people are leaving? You created a hostile work environment when you did this to me. People don't respect you anymore. They fear you, afraid you'll arbitrarily fire them at any time. That can't be conducive to a productive workforce. Don't look so shocked. I actually had friends there, and every time I see one they fill me in. And before you ask, I say nothing to denigrate you. I only say you were sure of your actions at the time. I'm curious as to how you're going to handle it when the numbers drop and the chairman pops round for a visit. Better hire a really good spin doctor if you don't already have one." Dave sighed quietly. "Bev, I shouldn't do this, but I'm going to tell you now this is going to get a lot worse. Be prepared for what's coming in the next few weeks. Now, if you will excuse me, I have some serious gym time to make up for." Beverly was lying in bed, feeling sorry for herself, going over the conversation when it hit her. He said, "I loved you so much at the time." She was still wondering if he still loved her when she finally drifted off into a fitful sleep. Beverly found herself sitting with Jen 3 days later, pouring her heart out. "I just don't know what to do any longer. Everything I say or try, he turns around on me. I'm beginning to understand he's carried these resentments around for years, but held them in. He hasn't touched me sexually in almost 8 weeks. I had to buy a vibrator to keep the edge off, or I'd be climbing the walls. I can't believe he turned down the job opportunity one wrangled for him. He didn't even wait for me to get home. He came here while you were running an errand for me and exploded. I'm very glad it was lunchtime and most everyone was out of the office or in the break room. Why did he get so angry when you were just trying to help him? Well, I had to promise the president over there I'd spread a little of our business his way if he helped me out. Things were going well until the final sit-down, and the guy laid it out. He was only hiring him as a direct favor to me, and only then after I had made some concessions. He told Dave he was giving him the absolutely worst territory, and if he didn't bring the numbers up quickly, he wouldn't make it past the probation period. Just because your wife carried you all those years, he told him, he wouldn't be as understanding. What did Dave do? He stood up and politely thanked the man for the interview. Then he turned and left, coming straight here. The president called me just after he left and raised hell with me because he just walked out. Then he demanded that I keep my commitment to him. They changed the subject, talking general business, when the receptionist called and said she had a gentleman there who wanted to see Bev, but he didn't have an appointment. He says he only needs 5 minutes, if you would be so kind. He says he has something to deliver. Curious, Bev had him escorted to her office. He was a large man with a friendly face, dressed impeccably in a nice suit and tie. He thanked her for her time and got down to business. "Ms. Beverly Patterson? Or should I address you as Mrs. David Waxman? I go by my maiden name here, for professional reasons. What can I do for you today?" He really looked apologetic when he handed her the papers. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but you've been served. Good day. I'll find my own way out." Beverly looked at the large envelope and fainted. She came to her senses on her sofa. Jen and X had placed her there, and Jen was wiping her face with a cold cloth. "What happened? You fainted." "I fainted? Why would I faint?" Jen held the envelope and it all flooded back. Bev started crying uncontrollably. It took her 20 minutes to cry it out. In a trembling voice, she asked Jen to open it and tell her how bad it was. Jen opened it up and nearly fainted herself. She read through them with intense concentration before placing them gently on the table in front of the couch. "The good news, Beverly, is that he's not filing for divorce." Bev started smiling again, but Jen held up her hand. "He's doing something a lot worse. He's suing the company, you, Bob Adler, and the chairman of the board for wrongful termination and mental cruelty. You need to get hold of him fast, Beverly, and talk him into withdrawing all this, or your career here is over. It doesn't matter whether he wins or loses, the bad publicity will be enormous. If you get to keep your job, you'll never rise any higher." Beverly nearly fainted again before pulling herself together and driving straight home, trying her best to set a land speed record for a luxury SUV. All she found was a note on the dining room table. "I'm sorry, Miss Patterson, but you crossed the line. My lawyer assures me it's pretty much a slam dunk, and your board will do just about anything to keep it quiet." She was pretty ticked when I told her I would accept no deals, that I intended to make this as public as possible. "Don't bother looking for me. On her advice, I've moved out, at least temporarily. I still love you, though I don't understand why. When this is over, I'm willing to go into counseling if you are." Maybe we can find our way back to each other. Maybe not, but I want to at least try. Oh, and if it makes any difference, I got a job, something new for me, and I look forward to it. We'll talk soon. Beverly leaned back in the kitchen chair, watching her life and career go up in flames. Just when she thought her life couldn't get any worse, it did. 2 weeks had gone by, and the hearing was in 4 days. The board had sent an independent HR expert and a lawyer in, and it didn't look good. The discussions they'd had with the employees did not paint her as the best of bosses. She was sitting in her chair, staring into space instead of working, when Bob Adler burst into the room. She had always liked Bob, had actively recruited him, and he'd done a really good job up until then. He'd flirted hard after she had fired Dave, and Beverly had leaned on him to help with the pain. She was lonely and depressed, and when he offered to take her to dinner to forget her problems for a while, she accepted. They would up drinking way too much wine, and when he kissed her, it felt so good she didn't stop him. Then reason kicked in, and she pushed him away. He apologized, and Beverly stopped any non-professional contact, even though he pleaded with her to give it a chance. God damn it, Bev, you need to do something about this. Solomon Enterprises just called and have decided not to sign the contract. There goes 18% of our business. All they said was they'd found a cheaper, more reliable source whose quality matched or exceeded ours. They told me they would be glad to let us bid next year, but it had better be something spectacular if this new supplier worked out. If that's not enough, Apex and Stewart Industries have both been hinting they may go to someone else. That's another 8%. That was absolutely the last thing Beverly wanted to hear. If they lost a quarter of their business, especially while they were tied up in the wrongful termination case, she was toast, as well as Adler and maybe a few others. She needed to move on this quickly. She sent Bob out, especially when he started pestering her for another date, saying it would be okay now that she was separated. Bev wasn't sure she had a marriage left, but a surefire way to finish it would be go out with Bob, and Dave finding out about it. She reached for the phone. Hello, Mr. Solomon. Thank you for taking my call. You're welcome, Beverly, and how many times have I asked you to call me Sal? I'd like to think after all this time we were friends. We are, Sal. Tell Susan hello for me, and I hear your daughter just got her MBA from Wharton. Is she going to be the future of Solomon Enterprises? He laughed. I hope so. The girl is already smarter than I ever was. I'm giving her 3 years, then Susan and I intend to sail away into the sunset. That sounds lovely. Sal, I'm guessing you know why I'm calling. Yes. I'm sorry, Beverly. The new supplier is cheaper, faster, and exceeds our quality standards. The difference is significant enough that I can't walk away from it. Have you signed the contracts yet? Not yet, but we're scheduled to finish up the paperwork in 2 weeks. Good. Please, Sal, give me a chance to see if I can match or better their deal. 1 meeting, that's all I ask. He sighed. All right, for old time's sake, I'll give you 1 shot. Set it up and I'll be there. Beverly was sure she could win the business back when talked to Sal, so she stopped worrying about that and focused on the upcoming hearing. Dave was at loose ends and about to go out of his mind. It looked as if he had any hope of finding anything in his line of work. He was going to have to expand the search area, and that meant moving. He was at the gym, straining his guts out, wondering if he had a marriage left at all. Yes, he had coasted the last year, but Beverly never once allowed him to tell her his line of thought. She didn't know he had deliberately let orders dwindle or that his core base of customers were fine with it. It was blind chance that after he left the gym, he ran into Sal Solomon and his wife, Susan. Sal had been one of Dave's first customers. In fact, they went back 8 years. After they got past the customer-salesman relationship, Dave was treated like family. He once told Susan she was the smart aunt he'd wished he had when I was growing up. That statement cemented their relationship, and Dave have even introduced her to others as his favorite aunt. Susan would giggle and coo, and Sal would grin at her antics. Sal, Susan, what a surprise. It's so good to see you. Are you in town on business? All pleasure. I'm happy to say. We just got out of the theater. I've always wanted to see The Odd Couple, and this is supposed to be the best touring version of the revival around. When we found out they would be here but miss us, we just had to come. Sal just smiled. He once told Dave that his real job was to make his wife happy, and his business was just a means to that end. He never forgot a birthday or anniversary, and most of his employees benefited from it, because he instituted a policy of giving his employees a half day off on your wedding anniversary and the whole day off afterwards to recover. As he put it, he also paid them for the time off. Turnover in his office and factories were the lowest in the state, Someone had to pass or move away before there was an opening. Every woman got roses and chocolates on her birthday, and every man got something in line with his hobbies, be it a box of golf balls, a new fishing reel, or fine cigars. Executives came to his business to observe his operation, and while many changed nothing, a few copied him. They insisted that Dave join them, and for 90 minutes he forgot my problems and admired what a true relationship was. Eventually, though, they brought up Dave's situation. Susan was baffled, and Sal was a little ticked. You were one of her best. I really don't understand it. Did she not understand your reasoning? She never gave me a chance to explain. Sal just called me into her office and fired me in the most public way possible. It's poisoned the well, locally. It looks like I'll be moving soon. Susan spoke up. Does Beverly know you're considering this? Is she willing to go with you? No, she doesn't know yet, and she would never leave her lover, Susan. Before you ask, I have to believe she's never cheated on me, at least physically. No, her lover is her job, and like a skilled seducer, it's offered her things I could never compete with. Sal was quiet for a minute, then grinned. Since you're at loose ends, my boy, pop by and see me in the next couple of days. I may be able to help you out. With nothing else better to do, Dave was in his office 3 days later. They talked general business for a few minutes when Sal asked what on the surface was an innocent question. Ever hear of the RGP Group? Dave had, indeed. A new company out of South Korea. They were trying to break into the US market. He had met the youngest son of the owner in an airport while we both waited on a delayed flight. They found out what each other did, and he happily showed Dave some of his products on his laptop. Dave looked them over and realized they would be in direct competition with his company. Luckily for the business, they were concentrating on the West Coast, far from his area of operation. He was a likable guy, though. His father had sent him to the US to knock on doors. And used to American ways, he had an entourage with him, but most were just as clueless as he was. Since they ended up in the same towns a lot, Dave kind of took him under his wing. Dave lost contact with him when they sent him to the Midwest, basing him in Chicago. Dave breathed a little sigh of relief. His products were high quality, and their prices were almost 30% less than the company Beverly and Dave represented. Dave knew that Sal hadn't asked the question casually and grinned. Yeah, I know of them. I'm even kind of friends with the youngest son of the owner, but I haven't talked to him in over a year. Sal looked a little embarrassed. They're expanding into our area. I talked to a few people who've used their product, and all seem to be satisfied. I haven't responded to them, mostly because of you. Your stuff is higher, but you always kept your word, always delivered on time, always followed up if we had a problem. We, Stuart, and a few others took your advice when you demonstrated the latest version, and we've been retooling for the better part of the year, using up old inventory. I don't know about the others, but I have about a month's supply before I'll be completely changed over. We find ourselves in a unique position. RGP's version fits even better into our plans than your old company's version does. The main reason I wanted you to come by was to ask your advice and offer you a job. Instead of selling, why don't you try buying? My purchasing manager is retiring, and we still haven't found anyone we feel will fit. With your experience in sales, vendors would have a hard time trying to take advantage. After all, you know all the tricks, right? Besides, most either know you or know your reputation, so it'll cut down on a lot of haggling. What were you making before you got fired? And I don't mean now. I mean your best year. Stunned, Dave told him. Not a problem there. In fact, I can probably go 5 or 10 grand better and work in performance and savings bonuses. Why don't you give it a try? Even if it doesn't work or you decide it's not for you, it'll look good on your resume when they see you've done some work on both sides of the business. In the end, Dave decided to give it a try. It beat moving out of state, and he was a little excited about it. The first time since he got fired he was excited about anything. He went home to his apartment, actually happy to be there. His former house was really her house, an edifice to her success. She'd often remind him in small ways that if their salaries had been equal, they could never have afforded it. Dave thought a little about the upcoming hearing and sighed. He wondered how much of what he was doing was seeking justice and how much was revenge. Probably half and half. He knew if he won, Beverly's career was over. Even if she got to keep her job, it was as far as she would ever go in the company. If he lost, it would still take years to recover from the damage. Would he be happy if he was vindicated? Probably. Would he be happy about hurting her career? In honesty, he thought he would. Just a bit. Not because of who they were, but because she needed an object lesson in how to treat people and remind her the world didn't revolve around her. Thinking back to when they first got together, he remembered a fresh-faced young woman who had set goals, her determination as strong as her abilities. He remembered when she got her first promotion. He'd taken her out to dinner to celebrate, at a place they normally couldn't afford. When she objected, Dave showed her his very first bonus check, telling her she wasn't the only one in the company who was rewarded for hard work. As fresh as it was yesterday, he remembered the lovemaking, the celebration of two young people desperately in love and on top of the world. He also remembered afterwards, as they lay exhausted, her head on his chest, her hand rubbing across his stomach as he toyed with her hair, thinking things were just going to get better. To make a long story short, they didn't. Get better, that is. Dave watched as each promotion sent her a little farther away from him. Her clothes got more expensive, her makeup and hair done by top-of-the-line professionals, and how angry she got if he even tried to kiss her before they out to one function or another, always with her as the center of attention. He remembered standing around, mostly ignored, feeling useless. Finally, he stopped going except on really important events. Bev was pissed at first, saying it sent the wrong message, before spinning it to look like it was her idea. He nearly tore her head off when it got back to him. She told people he didn't go because he was embarrassed that he couldn't keep up with the conversations. He made it a point to go to every function for a while, seeking someone important to her, clients especially, and having long enough conversations about things she never had a clue he even remotely knew. It got to the point she asked him to tone it down, so the focus could be on her. Well, today was the day, Beverly thought as she walked towards the conference room at the local state employment office. Her career would either be over or not, depending on the outcome of the negotiations. She hadn't seen her husband in almost 3 weeks and was surprised at his appearance. He'd lost most of the spare tire, let his hair grow out a little, and was sporting a closely trimmed beard. It made him look distinguished and young at the same time, if that was possible. There was what could only be described as a blonde bombshell sitting beside him, but Bev knew looks could be deceiving. This was Amanda Austin, one of the most experienced and feared labor lawyers in the state. She was there more as an observer, gathering more data for the lawsuit she knew was coming. Beverly had the best counterpart my company had to offer with her. He'd spent a little time coaching her on how to answer the inevitable questions, how to project confusion on how this had happened when all she was doing was what was best for the company. She asked him how he thought they would do. This case is a train wreck waiting to happen. There's no paper trail, no write-ups, no warnings, no explanation of the consequences if he didn't improve. His last review was very complimentary. By company policy, you should have had his manager handle the termination, with someone from HR as a witness. He was entitled to an appeal, to the next person up the food chain, in this case you. Since you fired him and never gave him his chance to take it to a higher authority, you once again breached company policy. You know, I read your file before I came down, and you got really good reviews. The home office and the board talked about you in the highest terms, yet here you are, making a mistake someone fresh out of college would avoid. I'll do my best, but if he wants to make it ugly, we can't stop him. Have you talked to him at all lately? Does he have any idea the negative impact this could have on your future? Beverly had to admit she hadn't at the time, which made his frown deeper, and he probably knew almost exactly what would happen to me if it got bad. Everyone sat down, and the arbitrator started the meeting. She had a video camera set up to record everything. She started off by introducing herself as an arbitrator from the State Employment Commission and explained that while they may reach some kind of agreement, it wasn't binding until everything was written down and notarized. She also explained that if an agreement couldn't be reached, or if either party disagreed with her decision, they were free to take it to the Capitol, or if that failed, court, in the form of lawsuits.